just going to start things off. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. We had votes this morning, which meant that we are delayed. So I know that the people in the room are aware of that, but for the people online and for the next panel, that has certainly changed the timing of things, and I appreciate everyone's patience. Welcome. So I'm calling the meeting to order. And welcome to the meeting number 24 of the House of Commons Standing Committee of Indigenous and Northern Affairs. We recognize that we meet on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Pursuant to the order of the House, the committee is continuing its study of Bill C-10, an act respecting the Commissioner for Modern Treaty Implementation. Before I introduce our first panel, I just want to do a little housekeeping to let you know that we're looking at doing clause by clause at our next meeting for the second hour. And so I'm seeing nodding heads, so that's good. And we've identified our next study, and it's going to be 228, and that is... Thank you very much. And Mr. Schmale is the sponsor of this. It's received second reading, so we are... Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. But thank you for your work. It's on forced sterilization, and so we'll be doing that. So to the committee members, please get your witnesses in by the end of the day on Friday, so that after our constituency week we can start that study as well. And okay, so thank you for that. And now I'd like to introduce our first panel. We've had some issues with the video conference connection, so our first panelist is unable to connect for interpretation, but they'll be online to listen. We also have Lori online too as well. MP Lori is there. And here in the room we have the Nunavut Tunguvik, Paul Ernaut, President, Alistair Campbell, Senior Policy Advisor, June Shapa, Chief Administrative Officer, and we also have the Talicho Government, Bertha Rabaseko, Zoe, Chief of Bechoko, Colin Slater, Legal Counsel. So we will start with the folks in the room to begin with. Paul, you'll have 5 minutes. I'll give you 30 seconds to wrap it up, and then we'll go from there, and then we'll have questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation to appear here today. I'm pleased to be here as the president of Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated and also the co-chair of the Land Claims Agreement Coalition. In 1993, Nunavut Tungavik signed the Nunavut Agreement, a modern treaty with Canada. Decades later, we have begun documenting, decades earlier, we had begun documenting our traditional land use and occupancy across our homeland before the federal government adopted a comprehensive land claims policy. That work eventually led to the signing of our agreement and the creation of Nunavut. Some parts of the agreement was implemented relatively smoothly. For example, capital transfer payments were clearly scheduled in the agreement, and Inuit-owned lands were registered through the land title system. However, other areas of implementation have proven far more difficult and sometimes required litigation to ensure that the commitments in our agreements are respected. One ongoing concern was the implementation of Inuit treaty rights in adjacent waters. The Nunavut Agreement states that Inuit must have meaningful access to fisheries near the Nunavut settlement area. In practice, Inuit had to struggle to secure the access to quotas allocations, which frequently favored other interests. Large portion of offshore fisheries are allocated to parties outside of Nunavut, despite Inuit communities being closest and adjacent to these resources. And the agreements explicitly acknowledge that the principle of adjacency and assurances of full economic participation by Inuit, although the courts ruled affirmed that Nunavut adjacent rights must be meaningfully considered in federal decisions. These principles have not been fully realized in offshore quotas allocations. Our experience with fisheries reflect a broader challenge that many modern treaties have faced: a gap between commitments contained in our agreements and the reality of implementation. NTI and other treaty organizations formed the Land Claims Agreement Coalition in 2003. Inuit and First Nations from across the country came together because we shared many of the same concerns about implementation. One of the coalition's outstanding recommendations since our formation in 2003 has been the creation of implementation body to review and monitor how modern treaties are implemented. Such an office would provide transparency and accountability and help overcome systemic barriers benefiting both Indigenous partners and governments. A commissioner for modern treaty implementation could help ensure that agreements are implemented faithfully and consistently, ensuring that commitments in modern treaties are implemented in spirit and in intent. We drafted Bill C-10 cooperatively as part of the effort.
30 seconds, my friend.
It represents a joint initiative to strengthen the implementation of modern treaties and improve the relationship between Indigenous people and the Crown. Ultimately, modern treaties are commitments. Implementing them fully is essential if we are to build partnership that these agreements were meant to create. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief So, you have 5 minutes, please.
Merci. My name is Bertha Rabiska Zoe. I'm a Clinchon person, and I'm a mother and a grandmother of 9. I'm also a lawyer. I've been legal counsel to Clinchon government for a number of years, leading files on implementation and intergovernmental relations. So I just wanted to say that to give an idea of the kind of knowledge that we bring to this table. So with that, Masi, good morning, Mr. Chair and honorable members of the committee. Thank you for inviting us to speak today. I acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, and I thank them for hosting us. I'm here as Chief of Betchakon, located in the Northwest Territories, and as a representative of the Clinchon government in full support of Bill C-10, an act respecting the Commissioner for Modern Treaty Implementation. As a founding member of the Land Claims Agreement Coalition, Clinchon government has been advocating for the creation of a Commissioner for Modern Treaties Implementation for over 20 years, including co-drafting this legislation with the federal government. We support this bill as drafted, and we urge you to pass it without amendment. Modern treaties are part of Canada's constitutional framework, and they cover nearly half of Canada's lands, waters, and resources. They are not only tools to advance reconciliation, they are how major projects move forward in our territories in a way that works for everyone. The Commissioner will help address longstanding structural and systemic barriers to modern treaty implementation. For example, Clinton's exercise of jurisdiction over education does not neatly fall within the mandate of one federal department. The fragmentation of responsibilities across federal departments and the absence of clear accountability has hindered the Clinton government's ability to make timely progress on exercising jurisdiction over education with its treaty partners in accordance with the Clinton Agreement. Because there is no dedicated independent oversight body to assess how these cross-departmental obligations are being carried out, these implementation gaps go unchecked. As modern treaty partners, there have been times when we had no choice but to resort to costly dispute and litigation. A commission would provide a new path for determining what is and isn't working, identifying barriers early and supporting timely and effective implementation before issues escalate to dispute resolution or the courts. Some have asked why this role should not simply be left to the Auditor General. The Auditor General's broad mandate spans all of government. It lacks the expertise or capacity needed to provide sustained and effective oversight on modern treaty implementation. Bill C-10 is designed to complement, not duplicate, existing oversight. It includes coordination mechanism to avoid unnecessary overlap. You have also heard the criticism that the Commissioner would have no teeth. Respectfully, such criticism risks dismissing the accountability role that independent agents of Parliament are meant to play by providing Parliament with the information needed to hold the government to account through independent audit and public reports to Parliament with a focus on results. One particularity of this oversight model is that Indigenous modern treaty partners themselves will provide additional accountability. We will be tracking progress closely and ensuring that reports are acted upon. Modern treaties are living commitments that span governments and generations.
Excuse me for a moment. Translation problem?
Soudainement. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
So the interpretation was interrupted slightly.
Okay. Maintenant?
J'entends maintenant.
Okay. Merci.
Merci.
Proceed.
Pardon.
Modern treaties are living commitments that span government and generations. Bill C-10 is Parliament's opportunity to put in place an oversight mechanism that will support treaty implementation regardless of who is in power. This is the type of consistency we need and deserve. In closing, we cannot fully implement our treaties alone. It is by working together that we can unlock the full potential of the treaties and of modern treaty nations to contribute to Canada's shared prosperity. I hope that all parties can understand the importance of Bill C-10. On behalf of Clinton government, I urge you all to support this bill and to make our vision of timely, effective, and full treaty implementation a reality. Merci, thank you.
Okay, before we go to the Conservatives first asking of questions, and Mr. Schmel, I just wanted to acknowledge that MP Bob Zimmer is here, and I wanted to thank you for your leadership during that tragic time. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I don't want to take too much time, Chair, but I just want to thank all of you who've reached out. So many emails just of condolences, but you know, prayers for the community and prayers for me, and it's very appreciated. You don't know, some of those times are very dark, and to see an email from a colleague is so appreciated. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thank you for your leadership and your faith and your strength. So thank you. MP Schmel.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, witnesses, again. This is a topic that we've heard lots of testimony on and very interested in kind of digging down on this. Just to reiterate what kind of we've said on this side of the House during this whole process, we agree with the diagnosis. We have some issues with the prescription. And there are issues with the prescription, and we understand and completely agree that Canada has not lived up to its word of treaty, traditional, modern, or otherwise, over successive governments, right? This is not a Liberal and Conservative issue. This is governments in general failing to live up to their signature. And so we agree with all that. And we would like to see this get better. We do have some concerns with the kind of the consequences piece of this legislation, which means there doesn't seem to be, other than naming and shaming, a piece that really has any, like, if a department does not follow the word, what happens? And the same kind of thing happens with an Auditor General report, whether it be housing, clean drinking water, et cetera, et cetera. We've had so many reports. We've had so many reports from this committee, but the failures still continue along the line. Nothing seems to change. And while this piece of legislation does create an office and an agent of parliament that can then kind of zero in on certain issues specifically, whereas the Auditor General maybe has a broader reach, there's, other than the report being tabled in Parliament, which the Auditor General has, other than naming and shaming, other than maybe presenting facts or laying out an argument for potentially more court cases, which the whole argument was to get rid of these court cases, right? But what we've determined, at least on this side, has determined through testimony is that the court cases probably will not be won't be stopped, because it's just basically presenting a case for the nations to take the government to court. So I guess maybe because you brought it up, Chief Rebecca Zoe, I'm sorry, Chief Bertha. Okay, thank you for letting me say that. You brought it up, like you basically said this time will be different. Maybe you can elaborate as to how or why this time will be different.
We're no stranger to court cases. There's ample court cases in Canada about litigation on Indigenous rights and treaties and land claim agreements and self-government and so forth. You know, we've got Section 35 and so on and so forth. So, but modern treaties create certainty, right? They create certainty. However, if there is no oversight, especially with the Crown, in right of Canada in this case, we will still continue the way we are. There is no, it's a whole of government approach when it comes to treaty implementation. It's not just one department. And so we've been saying that. There is a MTIO that was created. It's more like a policy type of entity, but again, an oversight like a treaty commissioner would make sure that Parliament has that oversight through this office. Reports will be tabled, and we at the LCAC as treaties will make sure that we'll make sure that what was committed to and obligations are met. And so
how would you do that? So we've had many reports, and don't get me wrong, I'm trying to help to improve the bill where we can. You talked about a whole government approach. Okay, well, I would say there's been documented failure over 150 plus years in healthcare, in education, in housing, procurement. It just seems like every department continues to fail. I think it's the machinery of government that's the broken system here, because that's the only kind of constant in this path we're taking here. So we have an Auditor General that tabled many reports on all of the things I've just described. Parliament asks the government questions in question period or in a committee setting like this. The media maybe covers it for a little bit. What happens next?
30 seconds to answer.
I think what we're proposing here, that, we work collaboratively on this bill. We're not strangers to collaboratively drafting legislation, especially in the Northwest Territories. And so this is where we come together as treaty partners to improve what isn't working, or try to improve what isn't working. And so we are reaching out to this government, to this parliament. And again, treaties shouldn't be blaming or shaming. It shouldn't be about party lines, right? And so we're coming to you to say, let's fix this together. Let's create something together that will make sure that as treaty partners, regardless of which parliament, which party was in power, whoever is in power represents the crown, and that we live up to those obligations. And so we work together. And so we're giving you something here for you to live by, that we can all work together to make sure that it works. So it is a systemic problem within government, and it's been like that for years. We know that. It's a broken system. And
Thank
so
you very
this
much.
is a way in which to make sure that those treaty obligations are committed or followed through, so that Canada prospers at the end of the day, because we're all working together.
Thank you
like
very
I
much.
said,
That's
we
great.
have more than 50% of the landmass.
Thank you very much. Okay, MP Levac for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank our witnesses for their participation today. So, it's been a long while that we've been working towards this objective, that is the establishment of this commissioner's office. We have been waiting for about 20 years for such a tool to help with the implementation of modern treaties. Now, of course, there's still work to be done. The legislation that we create, we can keep working on it and improve it, but at least it's a start. It's something that we can create as soon as we can, and then take it from there. And we've been hearing about the differences between a commissioner and an auditor general, but this will be someone dedicated to this task. They will only focus on the modern treaties and ensure the necessary follow-up. So an initial stage or step would be to look at things very closely and see what's needed and what the next steps are. So in and of itself, this is a feature that sets it apart from the other tools that exist within the government machinery. So could you share with us, Chef Zoe, Mr. Ingrud, I apologize for mispronouncing your name, what's your perspective on this down the road? Do you believe that this would make a difference, a commissioner, as opposed to other tools or other machinery? Will it make a difference?
Do you have one that you want to go first? Or?
Thank you for that question. When you look at the reports from the Auditor General, a lot of times you don't see follow-ups or reviews. And if we have this commissioner in place, strictly looking at modern treaties, I think that would go a long way, building the relationship that we have with the federal government, whether either party is in power. So I think that's why I think we push so hard to have this commissioner recognized, is that we need to have a dedicated person just looking at our treaties and what kind of improvements that need to be made and what needs to be implemented. So I hope I answered your question.
Well, when it comes to implementation, oh, sorry. When it comes to implementation, depends on the topic. And so you deal with the departmental people. You go from department to department on whatever the issue is. And so there is no consistent one departmental approach. before Indian Affairs used to oversee discussions, but when it comes to health, you got to talk to Health Canada. When it comes to procurement, you got to talk to procurement people, Public Works. You want to talk about RCMP issue, you got to talk to them. And so there's no consistent approach. And so because of that, there is no reporting requirement in a lot of cases. And so we do try to do our own thing to make sure that as treaty partners that we're consistently approaching to make sure that we have a whole of government approach. But when your treaty partner doesn't have that, it's making it very difficult. It prolongs things. There's misinterpretation, and there's you're up against different policies and procedures. And so, but with a treaty commissioner to help oversight some of these things to make things more efficient, effective, and deal with things in a timely, expeditious manner, I think you can avoid litigation in a lot of cases. But it's really those things that you go to litigation over, the misunderstanding, the misinterpretation, and policy questions that a lot of departments don't understand their treaty obligation, because it's a whole of government treaty, right? And so some of these departments don't really understand that they have obligations in the agreement and that they should be at this table in discussions with us. So these are the kind of things that we are hoping to alleviate, or as much as possible, and avoid litigation, because it doesn't really solve anything other than nothing against lawyers. I'm a lawyer, but, yeah.
Madame Chapa, did you?
Thank you. The purpose of the legislation is to, number one, strengthen the relationship between Indigenous treaty holders and the Parliament. The second purpose of the legislation is to help fulfill some of the obligations that are contained in our treaties. The third purpose of the legislation is to protect and honor, or to uphold the honor of the Crown. In the way that the system works, we believe that it is the responsibility of the Parliament to uphold the honor of the Crown.
Appreciate that. Okay, MP Gill for 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank our witnesses for being with us today. With everything we've been hearing from our witnesses over the past number of weeks, I think it sounds like we are ready to go ahead. That's what we've been hearing in witness testimony, and you have added your voices to the same key message today. Chief Zoe, you underlined the difference between the work that is being done by the Auditor General and a future potential commissioner. But maybe once again, we are strengthening the argument, the same argument here, but do you have concrete cases that you can speak of, bring to our attention, that show that the work of a commissioner will be more efficient or effective in a situation that happened in the past where you had a complex or difficult situation? And the same for Mr. Ingoud as well, if you can answer the same question. So 2 examples, if you can. Thank you.
As is stated, the Auditor General has a broad mandate, whole of government approach to deal with federal spending and operations and that, and it's not going to be able to provide continuous specific to the treaties, and so a commissioner is going to require expertise. It's going to be able to bring in expertise and build partnership engagement. And so bringing that knowledge and experience to the role is going to be very crucial, because modern treaties are a special kind of treaties. And so it is, in some cases, like in the Northwest Territories, a three-party agreement, so with the territorial government as well. And so I think specialization and the implementation of that is going to be very crucial. And so we don't see the Auditor General being able to provide that, and this treaty commissioner would certainly have that expertise and knowledge.
Merci beaucoup. En fait, vous reclarifiez encore la...
Thank you very much. Once again, you made your position clear. Maybe part of my question was the following. Do you have concrete examples of a particular file, for instance, where a commissioner would have made a difference? I mean, maybe prevented a court case, or a concrete example in any case that you can speak to. If not, maybe Mr. Ingout.
Hey, thank you for that. I think a good example that I mentioned earlier is the fisheries. If we had this commissioner, it would provide background information to the ministers of the day, of their obligations, and that none of these litigations would come forward if there was more information provided to the minister of the day, and I'm talking about the fisheries, because it clearly states in our agreement that adjacency is very important, and that Inuit benefit from any economic opportunities, and it clearly states in our agreement that we have to benefit in order to build our own fisheries. So I guess that's one of the examples that I can give. And also, Alistair, if you want to add.
Yeah, I would just add that of modern treaties, just this century, there have only been 3 reviews of them by the Auditor General. That is the Nunavut Agreement and Gwich'in Agreement in 2003, the Inuvialuit Agreement in 2007, and the Nunatsiavut Agreement in 2015. So that's, I mean, there are 30 parties. If you look in the annex to Bill C-10, there are 30 parties to modern treaties, and only 3 of them have been reviewed as such by the Auditor General this century. So what we want is something that would be consistent and carried out. And just to clarify that a little bit, the reviews that were done in those years, they did point out real faults that the government was showing in the process of implementation. And this is the kind of thing, because the Auditor General or a commissioner of this kind has access to data that we don't normally have. We don't have the resources to spend on this. Our job is to implement agreements, not to review what the department is doing. And because of that, these kind of reviews can give us a lot of information as to how things can be improved. And then in terms of where does it go next, in 9.3 of the draft bill, it makes it clear that a review of performances is not a substitute for the dispute resolution process that's provided for in modern treaties, and we have that option as well. So it may lead to, in some cases, for example, with the Nunatsiavut Agreement, the 2015, the Auditor General said such and such needs to be done, and with a particular fisheries case, and the Fisheries Department response was in fact, to all those findings of the Auditor General, the department said yes, 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 with qualifications. But one of these qualifications was it could then be reviewed by the dispute resolution process.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Madame Gill. Yes, you're facing the other way. We are running a bit late, of course, because of the votes. Is it the will of the room to continue with the next panel, or does anyone have any quick questions or follow-up? Oh, Ms. Idlout. You had a quick question?
I do.
How much time do you think you need? 2 minutes?
2 seconds to ask
2
a
seconds,
question.
okay, even better, all right. We can all take lessons from you, all right, love it.
Yes. So from both witnesses, if they could respond to us, other than the courts, whose job is it to ensure the honor of the crown is being upheld? Thank you.
Okay, I think writing is okay, is that what you said, Ms. Idlout? I believe you said in writing they can respond, or?
Sure.
I'm being flexible here, if you wanted to hear a response, as long as it's quick.
If we could hear from them, that would be great.
30 seconds or less to each of the witnesses.
We'll respond in writing. Yep.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much to our panel. Thank you very much for the testimony. This is all very helpful and useful information. In the meantime, we will suspend briefly to get ready for the next panel, and we will be back momentarily. We're going to suspend here. now continue with our second round of witnesses. I will start with the Grand Chief for the Council of Yukon First Nations. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning. ING Mathio, yeah. Oh, there's really bad echo. ING Mathio, yay. Kluan Man Kaiiche. My name is Mathia Alatini. I am a citizen of Kluani First Nation, former chief of Kluani First Nation, and we are one of the self-governing nations in the Yukon. I am currently the Grand Chief of Council of Yukon First Nations, and I'm here to support, to express my full support for Bill C-10. An act respecting the Commissioner for Modern Treaty Implementation. This bill reflects, as we've heard just in the panels, this bill reflects decades of work by Indigenous modern treaty partners to ensure that Canada consistently delivers on constitutionally protected treaties. These are not abstract agreements. Modern treaties directly affect the day-to-day lives of all of our communities, the opportunities that present to our communities, and the well-being of those people within our communities. For too long, gaps and delays in treaty implementation would cause real, tangible harms to Indigenous people in Yukon and in other regions of Canada. Bill C-10 addresses a clear and urgent need, sustained, for independent oversight. It allows for consistency between elected governments. This treaty implementation is specialized, ongoing work, and a dedicated commissioner would focus on this work in a way that a broad whole-of-government auditor cannot. The treaty commitments do not change with governments. Without this focus, agreements risk delays, misunderstandings, and practical challenges that directly affect our communities. It isn't about politics, it's about building a system that works for the people whose lives depend on these agreements. The Auditor General's role remains vital, and this bill is designed to complement that work, not duplicate it. As outlined in Bill C-10, the Commissioner's Office would be independent. It would assess, report, and advise, while Parliament would retain the authority to decide remedies and hold ministers accountable. Transparency is the Commissioner's most powerful tool, and Parliament's ability to compel answers would ensure challenges are addressed promptly. Transparent reporting would help problems get fixed before they escalate into disputes or litigation. Public reporting would also allow systemic barriers to be identified early, preventing harms to communities and creating opportunities for practical, timely solutions, and hopefully to avoid litigation. The Commissioner would provide credible, expert, whole-of-government oversight, giving departments strong incentives to track, plan, and coordinate effectively, because Parliament and Indigenous partners would be able to see their progress. This accountability would ensure that implementation is not just tracked on paper, but followed through in practice. Indigenous modern treaty partners would use the Commissioner's findings as an independent evidence to advance implementation. Bill C-10 was carefully co-developed with Indigenous partners and would focus specifically on implementation without interfering in policy design or enforcement, which would remain ministerial responsibilities. In fact, it would strengthen ministerial accountability by providing Parliament with credible, treaty-specific information, helping ensure commitments to citizens would be upheld. The bill is practical, achievable, and long overdue. It would identify problems before they escalate, strengthening that relationship between Canada and Indigenous governments, and in our case, the tripartite relationship with the territorial government as well. It would ensure that the rights of our citizens are upheld. This bill is not about creating new obligations, it's about making sure that the federal system consistently delivers on what Canada has already agreed to in constitutionally protected treaties. It's about ensuring promises made in treaties and future bills would be kept, and that federal systems would work in practice, not just in principle. At its core, this is work about people. It's about giving Yukon First Nations children and all our Indigenous children a fair chance to reach their full potential and live their dreams. We encourage the committee to support the timely passage of this bill for the benefit of our communities, citizens, and the integrity of our constitutionally protected treaties.
Okay, thank you very much. We will go to our next witness here. We will go. Okay, we will go to Chief Counselor Troy Sam.
Good afternoon. Good morning from the Tsimshian Nation. Sim Giget, Sigam Hana, Chiefs and Matriarchs. My name is Chief Troy Sam from Kitsim-Kalem. We're one of 14 tribes of the Tsimshian Nation, and we are the third in BC to ratify our treaty in 2025. We are working hand in hand with the Comox First Nations and our sisters and brothers from Kitsilas. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of Bill C-10. Kitsim-Kalem ratified our treaty on November 1st, 2025, with overwhelming support from our members, with 90% voter turnout, a 90% approval of the treaty, and 90% approval of the Kitsim-Kalem Constitution. That strong mandate reflects unity within our nation and confidence in the work ahead. Modern treaties are constitutionally protected agreements. They represent negotiated, legally binding commitments between Indigenous nations and the Crown. Yet, across Canada, there has been a persistent implementation gap, a gap between what is promised in the treaty and how those promises are carried out in practice. Bill C-10 is designed to close that gap. With the office set up, it'll help with collaboration with the other modern treaty nations and consistencies between election cycles. The office would also be able to help with identifying gaps between the legislation and case law. I see more efficient use of time where the proper delegations to the proper departments can be made. For Kitsim-Kalem, effective implementation is not theoretical. It affects jurisdiction over lands and resources, environmental decision-making, fiscal arrangements, and the ability of our government to exercise authorities as negotiated. Too often, implementation challenges arise because responsibility is fragmented across federal departments. One ministry may interpret an obligation differently from another. Timelines can stretch, coordination can falter, nations are left navigating administrative processes rather than engaging in true nation-to-nation governance. That is not how constitutional agreements should function. Bill C-10 establishes an independent commissioner whose sole mandate is to review and audit federal implementation of modern treaties. That focuses matters. Unlike broader oversight bodies, this commissioner will concentrate specifically on whether federal institutions are fulfilling treaty obligations as intended, systematically, and consistently. Public reporting to Parliament changes the accountability dynamic. Implementation becomes visible, it becomes measurable, it becomes subject to scrutiny beyond internal department reporting. For Kitsim-Kalem, this structural oversight reinforces a simple but essential principle. Treaties are binding commitments requiring measurable performance. Implementation affects economic opportunities. It affects how lands are managed. It affects how regulatory powers are exercised. When obligations are delayed or inconsistently applied, it impacts real outcomes for our community. Some examples are forest management, dealing with naturally occurring problems, such as the mountain pine beetle or root rot. We can manage our forests to be fire safe and protect our communities and other infrastructure. Bill C-10 creates a mechanism to examine patterns, not just isolated disputes. If there are recurring administrative bottlenecks, unclear policy interpretations, or inconsistent application across departments, those systemic issues can be identified and addressed. This is not adversarial oversight. This is structurally accountability. It is fair treatment to all the parties. It supports better governance on all sides by clarifying expectations and reinforcing standards. It encourages federal institutions to approach treaty obligations with coordinated whole of government discipline. Most importantly, this legislation protects implementation of treaty rights. For Kitsim-Kalem, that protection is critical as we continue strengthening our governance, institutions, and exercising jurisdiction responsibly. Constitutional recognition must be matched by operational follow-through. Bill C-10 affirms that modern treaties are not symbolic milestones. They are enduring frameworks that require consistent oversight to function effectively. Supporting this bill is a statement that implementation matters as much as negotiation. It affirms that commitments made in a treaty must be honored in practice, not only in principle. Kitsim-Kalem supports Bill C-10 because it strengthens accountability, reinforces constitutional integrity, and promotes measurable follow-through in modern treaty implementation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief Councillor Sam. Our next witnesses are from the Tsawwassen First Nation. Now, by the looks of it, you both are in the same room. Is that true? Okay, so whenever you two are speaking, or one of you are speaking, just make sure the other is on mute, or we might get some feedback. You probably already know that, but just a friendly reminder. Okay, I don't know who has the floor, but whoever does, you have 5 minutes.
Hi, Chika. Good morning. Welcome. Misep Kakwelum. Bonjour, honorable members of the Standing Committee on Indigenous and Northern Affairs. Chamkwat Tanasqui, Tsawwassen. My name is Chamkwat, and I'm from Tsawwassen First Nation. My English name is Valerie Cross, and I'm an executive counselor at Tsawwassen First Nation. I'm also a Squeakle, the speaker for our Legislative Assembly. I want to extend a great thank you for the invitation to appear before you and the opportunity to express our nation's strong support for Bill C-10. I also want to just acknowledge the Creator and thank for another beautiful day on Mother Earth. We are so blessed to live in the lands that we do. For the context, Tsawwassen First Nation is located on the southwest corner of British Columbia, where the Fraser River meets the Salish Sea. I am incredibly proud to say that our nation was one of the first to negotiate a treaty under the BC Treaty Commission process, and that we have risen to the unique challenge of being the only urban modern treaty nation in Canada. And with our treaty, we have reclaimed our own laws, we've rebuilt our governance institutions, we've created new economic development opportunities to support the well-being of our members. The story of the Tsawwassen First Nation and the Tsawwassen Treaty is a success story, but this journey has not been without its challenges. Like many other of the witnesses that have appeared before this committee, we too have faced barriers to having our treaty fully implemented by our federal partners. Over the past 17 years, we've devoted considerable resources to working with the federal government to resolve treaty implementation issues through our preferred methods of dialogue and collaboration, rather than relying on litigation. And while we strive to resolve our implementation issues through constructive dialogue, this approach has not always been successful. For example, our nation continues to encounter challenges with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, who have been unwilling to learn or work directly with the Tsawwassen First Nation on management of crab and salmon, traditional foods in which have sustained our people since time immemorial. We've also faced challenges respecting the implementation of the periodic review of our treaty, a process that is intended to ensure our treaty is a living agreement that can grow and evolve alongside the needs of our community. Examples like these are why we have been strong advocates for the creation of the Commissioner of Modern Treaty Implementation since 2009, when our treaty came into effect and our nation joined the Land Claim Agreement Coalition. I also want to be clear that the treaty implementation issues we have faced have not been limited to the actions of one particular government. These challenges are structural and have persisted across all governments led by multiple political parties. I'm here today because Bill C-10 represents an opportunity to overcome these challenges and to ensure that our treaties are respected as the living agreements that they were always intended to be. This co-developed and co-drafted piece of legislation is the product of decades of hard work by both members of the Land Claim Agreement Coalition and our federal partners. Through Bill C-10, we finally have the independent oversight body that has long been needed to hold the federal government accountable to Parliament in respect of modern treaty implementation. The creation of a Commissioner of Modern Treaty Implementation will improve accountability by reporting on the implementation across the entire federal government, identifying implementation barriers early and publicly, issuing guidance to ensure clarity and consistency across agreements, and ensuring that Parliament and the members of this committee receive the evidence needed to hold the government accountable. I like to think of the Auditor General as a general practitioner and the Commissioner as a specialist surgeon. The Auditor General audits hundreds of departments. Indigenous treaties are just often a footnote in a massive report on government spending. The modern treaties are constitutional law, not just on program spending. The Commissioner provides a deep legal and cultural literacy that's required to understand if the treaty's spirit is being met, which a financial auditor simply is not trained to do. I firmly believe that the Commissioner will make sure the federal government consistently delivers on the commitments Canada has already made in our constitutionally protected treaties. I also believe the successful implementation not only benefits Indigenous people, but that it benefits all Canadians by creating greater certainty of rights, strengthening partnerships, and building an environment that supports greater economic development. When high tides raise all boats. Excuse me. For these reasons, I urge all members of this committee and all parliamentarians to support Bill C-10 in its current form. I also just want to add a small comment. We always do what we've always done, we'll always get what we always got. It's time for a change. It's time to invest in the opportunity for this change. We all have a role to play in holding government accountable to the commitments made in modern treaties. Honorable committee members, I hope we can count on you. Haisaka, thank you, merci.
All right, thank you very much to our witnesses. We now go to our first round of questioning, and 6 minutes, we have the Conservatives, Billy Bourne.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our guests online for joining us today on this important matter. I'm a former chief from Treaty 6 on the prairies, and what we say on the prairies is all these treaty rights we have since the late 1800s, but we're still being treated right. And so I empathize with how the modern treaties are also experiencing that same feeling. My question is to Valerie Cross at Tawasin. Simplistically, Ms. Cross, if the treaties were being implemented, the modern treaties, would there be a need for a commissioner?
I guess that is a question that is a dream. If the treaties were being implemented properly, if the federal government and the honor of the Crown was being upheld, we wouldn't be having this discussion. We wouldn't be needing to have a commissioner. But they are not. We have heard from witness after witness after witness, treaty partner after treaty partner, that their failure of implementation is been a an ongoing structural issue across all different types of political parties well over 20 years. This is a long time issue that really needs to be addressed, and the tool that we believe and that we've worked on and we've co-developed together to support the proper implementation and the support of our treaties is Bill C-10. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And just to build on a little bit more, we've heard that this is a dispute resolution mechanism. It's an accountability measure. I share some frustrations, broadly speaking, as a First Nations Indigenous person in this country about the situation unfolding in BC when it comes to Cowichan, Tuatha, and Musqueam, and the unfortunate headlines that seem to be driving that area apart, quite frankly. How would this Commissioner's Office mitigate against those types of situations, even amongst the nations themselves?
boy, that's a great question, a big question. Working together as one and advancing our issues together, and making sure that people are properly informed about what Aboriginal rights mean and how we're meant to work together and share the resources that we are sharing in this beautiful province and country that we live in. How the Treaty Commissioner could assist with such things is that I think the understanding of what our treaties mean in all levels of government and in the citizens of British Columbia. You know, Honorable Billy Morin, I have a lot to share about this, but I don't think I have enough time to do that. And I think that a question like that to say, could we be preventative? How would the Treaty Commission, would the Commissioner prevent this? I think working together, teaching, learning, understanding, and being able to ensure that modern treaties and agreements do not expand into areas without modern treaty without unresolved claims. I'm sorry. I would need some more time to respond to this.
No,
it's a very complex question.
That is totally fair. It's a very complex situation out west as well. So I appreciate you even just giving it some consideration. Thank you, Chair. Just a moment. I had submitted a motion. I would like an opportunity just for a second to have that considered. I want to apologize just really quickly to our guests here. Just some housekeeping that I have to technically use up my time to do. It shouldn't take too long. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the motion that was submitted last Friday by myself through the committee chair and clerks, that the committee invite the Minister of Indigenous Services to appear before the committee for 1 hour at the earliest opportunity to provide an update on the ongoing public health and infrastructure emergency in Saskatchewan First Nation, including the federal government's response to the community's January 4th, 2026 declaration of a state of emergency following sewage contamination and water system failures that forced hundreds of residents to evacuate to locations such as Thunder Bay, Kingston, St. Catharines, and that the committee also invite the leaders of Saskatchewan First Nation to appear for 1 hour to provide testimony regarding the ongoing situation in the community and the federal government's response.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morin. Is there any discussion on this? Sivak? Yes, Mr. Batiste.
Are we suggesting that we not keep going with the legislation that we have and pause everything that we're doing on legislation for this, or is this something that we can look at after the legislations that we're trying to pass go through?
I didn't provide a specific date. At the earliest convenience, we'll make it flexible to our schedule here.
Okay. No problem.
Everyone support? Madame Gill?
Tous d'accord de revenir, de faire l'étude?
Agreed on the study or debate? Yeah, we agreed to proceed with the study. But as Mr. Batiste was saying, there's already a lot of legislation. We have C10, 228, S2 maybe, because there's a deadline of April 26th, so I wouldn't want us to dilute the work here, if you will, but if we can squeeze it in and be flexible about it, then I agree. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's in agreement because government legislation does take priority as well. So everyone seems good with that, so approved. Okay, and it looks like unfortunately your time is up, Mr. Morin. So we do have a liberal round, but I don't have. You'll go, Mr. Batiste, 6 minutes.
I'd like to thank the witnesses for their testimony today. I'd like to thank you for your innovation on this. I think Modern Treaty Commissioner is an excellent avenue that we can pursue as First Nations all across the country. I know this is just related to the modern treaty partners. My question is very short and to the point. Do you support this current legislation as written, or do you believe that there needs to be amendments? Anyone can speak to that, and if it's a short answer, then we'll keep it that way. Anyone can go. Are you satisfied with the legislation or would you like amendments? Not all at once. You're not helping me out here, guys. I'm trying to pass this quickly. You guys got to start. I'm not trying to lead the witnesses here, but
Satisfied with the legislation as is.
okay.
Heichka, it was co-developed. I'm satisfied with the legislation as is. Heichka.
Would you like
satisfied with the legislation as is as well.
Would you like it passed speedily through this committee? Speedily. It's a word I created. Yes, yes. Okay, no more questions from the Liberals. We've got our directions.
Madame Gill. Looks like that was a quick round from the Liberals.
Combien de temps? De toute façon, je pense que les...
Well, if the witnesses feel like providing more information in writing, of course, they can always do that. Now, the departments could maybe interpret things a little differently, and that could be an issue, but the Auditor General cannot do anything about it. So what could the Commissioner do to make sure that there's harmony in terms of the interpretation by the different departments in terms of respecting the treaties, and so that the communities save time? It also applies to the department. So that's my question, but you can also answer in writing because we don't have a lot of time. Thank you.
6.
I will answer that. I think that the Commissioner, sorry, there's this echo. The Commissioner would allow for a consistent across department opportunity to create the dialogue, the relationships, and then when new funds are being created, one of the examples is there's always this provision for on reserve. Modern treaties are not on reserve. We need to have modern treaty language built into all new funding that gets developed. And that's one of the challenges that consistently modern treaties are having to lobby for. And if we could have somebody who's actually keeping an eye on that, it would save everybody a lot of time.
Est-ce que quelqu'un d'autre veut répondre à la question?
Does anyone else wish to answer the question?
Ça, je veux dire comme Monsieur Baptiste.
May just comment for a minute. Tsawwassen First Nation, as you've heard, has been going through the treaty review process, which is built into the treaties, and all modern treaties have a process in there for periodic review. Tsawwassen is the first modern treaty nation in British Columbia going through that process, and it's been challenging for everybody because there really are no procedures and standard rules set up for that. And I think it would be very helpful to have a treaty commissioner looking at those processes and procedures and being able to make recommendations about efficiency and effectiveness that would pay off for all of the other nations who will, in due course, be going through exactly the same process. And so I think I can imagine that would result in considerable efficiencies for every nation and for the federal government as well.
J'aurais peut-être poursuivi tout simplement.
Well, I was referring to the powers of the Commissioner to prevent different interpretation of the legislation from department to department. We're running out of time, but if you want to provide additional information, you can do so in writing. Thank you. That will be all for me.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Madame Gill. And now we do have a minute or two. I know on our side, Mr. Zimmer had a question or two. If it's okay with the committee, mind if everyone, 2 minutes? Oh, you really? Well, look at that cooperation.
C'est comme ça que ça fonctionne.
This is what we're all about here.
It's usually how it functions here.
We get a lot that we're the party with the biggest heart, and I get that and I understand that, but I appreciate from the block. Okay, Mr. Zimmer, 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good to see you there, by the way. And just my question is to Valerie of Tawasin First Nation. And my question to you is, because what it appears, and some of our colleagues have said too, this doesn't seem to be the answer to all the problems that are out there with treaties and other situations. And to me, I look at it as more of a potential bottleneck, because now everybody has to wait through this one commissioner's office to maybe get their restitution for what some of the problems are. But my questions specifically are around the Cowichan decision and the Musqueam agreement. And how would you see this particular bill C10 and a treaty commissioner, how would you see that as a good thing for that particular situation that really is affecting all British Columbians today, causing a whole bunch of unrest and uncertainty? How would a treaty commissioner solve that? It's for Valerie.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer, for your question. As I stated earlier, it's a very complex issue, but I'm going to defer this question to my colleague Mary Child to respond to. Mary?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think the answer to this really is that this commissioner's office is not intended to address things that principally affect nations that are not modern treaty nations. It's not intended to address everything. Musqueam are not a modern treaty nation. Cowichan are not a modern treaty nation. And those disputes about land and title and Aboriginal rights, in fact, show the desirability of trying to settle things through treaties rather than litigation. So to the extent that it might affect those in future, I would argue that anything that makes modern treaties more effective and more attractive is going to encourage nations to enter into treaties rather than have to resort to litigation to establish their rights.
So potentially the treaty commissioner wouldn't have any effect on specifically the Cowichan decision or the Musqueam agreement?
No, those are not questions of treaty interpretation or implementation. Those issues were not part of that litigation.
Thank you.
Okay, we're good. Okay, perfect. Just the next meeting, we have an hour. I'm going to keep talking just to make Jaime, we have witnesses in the first hour on Thursday's meeting, and then clause by clause of C10 after that. Everyone good with that? Witnesses for S228 due by Friday? You have some? I do, and I'll help you out with those too. All right. Everyone good? We're going to adjourn. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, witnesses. We'll see you on Thursday.